AFRTS.
This is Air Force Television News with TSgt Gary Quesenberry.
Webster defines misery as suffering, grief, distress, anguish. That's a fitting definition of what's going on along the borders of Kosovo, Albania, and Montenegro as thousands of men, women, and children literally run for their lives. As the U.S. Air Force-led air campaign to immobilize the Serbian military continues in the skies, on the ground, other Air Force men and women are trying to stave off a pathetic byproduct of the Balkans War. One of the results of the ethnic cleansing by the Milosevic government in Belgrade, thousands of Kosovar men, women, and children bewildered, frightened, sick, and exhausted, trying to escape what witnesses are calling wholesale massacre. The fight against the Serbian military has also become a struggle to help the oppressed. And at the forefront, the Air Force, assuming the role of humanitarian. Staff Sergeant Pachari Luki was aboard one of the first relief flights to the Balkans.
The enormity of it is almost too massive to comprehend. Thousands and thousands of Kosovar Albanians huddled together in the fetid squalor of a no-man's land along the Kosovar-Albanian border, living victims of a concentrated ethnic cleansing by the Serbian military. And these are the lucky ones. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of others lie dead in Kosovo, victims of the Milosevic government. The magnitude of this valley of misery, this mass of the sick and exhausted and confused and dying and lost, could have been worse. Had it not been for a massive relief effort led by the United States and quickly joined by dozens of other nations. I was on the first relief-laden Air Force C-17 to land at this airstrip in Tirana, Albania. And almost before the engine stopped spinning, the wheels stopped rolling, airmen were moving pallet after pallet of life-saving relief supplies for the desperate refugees.
Not only have we been doing 100% of the combined download operations here off the C-130s and C-17s from 6 or 7 different countries, we've also been taking what we've downloaded off the big airlift aircraft and hand loading that onto helicopters and trucks so they can move that out to the forward operating locations.
Everything from humanitarian daily rations and medical supplies to tents and blankets. All things we take for granted. All things the refugees need just to make it through another day, another night. From the airstrip, airmen and other workers wasted little time getting the relief supplies to staging areas so the humanitarian shipments could reach the areas where they were intended, to a people without a land, without a home.
This operation will no doubt go on for quite a while, and it will involve a lot of people. And we will be working very closely with our friends in Albania, cooperating with them, to try to get these supplies as quickly as possible to the areas where they are most needed.
And so, while one part of the Air Force is daily trying to reduce the Serbian military to impotency, another part is hard at work trying to save the lives of the innocent caught up in the ethnic conflict. Staff Sergeant Pachari Luki, Air Force News, Tirana, Albania.
The humanitarian effort is more than just food and tents and water and clothing. It's also about saving the lives of innocent victims. Senior Airman Jeff Thompson has one small but significant example.
Aboard this helicopter, 4 children who badly need medical attention. An Air Force medic, Staff Sergeant Cliff Shingleton, is among a group of NATO troops handling the emergency. First off the chopper, an 18-month-old baby. Next, a young girl, the only survivor in her family. She and the 3 others injured in the Serbian sweep of the province. All of the children suffered broken bones and other wounds that are days or even weeks old. They were first taken from the helicopter. Singleton and others provided immediate medical attention.
We didn't see anything here that we had any trouble with, and the French did have a physician that was able to direct our care fairly well.
After the initial treatment, the 4 were transferred by aid workers to a nearby hospital for further medical care. 4 of the lucky ones in the Balkan tragedy. Senior Airman Jeff Thompson, Air Force News.
As the humanitarian effort accelerated along the Kosovo borders, airmen involved in that and the air campaign were hearing words of encouragement. President Clinton making a special trip to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, telling airmen their involvement in the NATO operation represents America at its finest. The Commander-in-Chief, accompanied by Defense Secretary William Cohen and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Henry Shelton, called Barksdale part of an Allied force working to save innocent lives. The President also said those involved in the Kosovo operation during combat service. B-50 in the Serbian war campaign. Back now to the air campaign. The assets being used by NATO continue to grow. As we began production, 82 additional aircraft, F-15s, F-16s, and tankers were either in Europe or on their way to bolster Operation Allied Force. These assets followed an earlier increase in the aircraft numbers, preceded by the B-1B bombers with their deadly cluster bombs from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, now temporarily based in the United Kingdom and already making their presence felt. A dozen more F-117 stealth fighter bombers from Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico are now based at Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany, joining their sister aircraft that are operating out of Aviano Air Base in Italy. As these assets joined the fray, more of a time-tested member of the Air Force inventory, the venerable A-10 Thunderbolt joined in, becoming an even bigger player in Allied force, working out of Aviano Air Base. Known by those who fly and maintain it as the Warthog, the A-10 gives NATO a low-level punch for a close look from Staff Sergeant Noah Berg of the aircraft called the Tank Killer.
From nose to tail, the Warthog is a product of lessons learned in Vietnam. The use of devastating air power to aid ground troops, day or night. It's not as flashy or high-tech as other aircraft in service, but it brings old-fashioned firepower and tenacity to the battlefield, flying at low altitudes dramatically slower than aircraft like the F.
It's an airplane that can carry and loiter in a battle area and to deliver a beating.
The firepower were built in the threat of Soviet tanks in Europe, with the Warthog's popularity.
And up to the time of Desert Storm, there was talk that the airplane popularity amongst the planes employed as it was designed to. We quickly realized that it would be very difficult to replace with anything else.
Destroyed Iraqi ground forces and even chalked up the aircraft's first air-to-air kill by downing an Iraqi gunship helicopter for search and rescue missions, another mission that harkens back to Vietnam. More recently, another mission was added to the Hog's profile.
We also performed the airfac role. In that capacity, again, throw back to the Vietnam era, where we had forward air controllers. The A-10 goes out now in its OA-10 mission role, and we go out and provide that service, that function, that key ingredient to the battlefield. We direct air, we direct hardware into the target areas where needed based on the needs of the ground commander.
But in Kosovo, as the focus shifts to concentrated troops and armor, the A-10 is once again doing what it does best, delivering devastating firepower from treetop level. Staff Sergeant Noah Berg, Air Force News, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Arizona.
When we return, teaching down pilots how to stay alive in enemy territory.
Climbing mountains, free fall parachuting, scuba diving. These are all ways I get to work. I'm an Air Force pararescueman. Hello, I'm Staff Sergeant Doug Widener. As a pararescueman on the Air Force Special Operations Team, I arrive first at remote locations to provide emergency medical care and evacuation. It's obvious my job takes physical strength. It also takes education. The same skills that help anyone succeed. Are you up to the challenge? Stay in school, stay in shape, aim high.
All those NATO aircraft making up Operation Allied Force in the Balkans depend on a lot of things to fly their missions. But the most important is gasoline. Without it, they don't fly. And they get it not only on the ground, but in the air as well, from a fleet of tankers. Senior Airman John Somheil went along on one of the refueling flights.
A KC-135 leaves the runway just after dark at RAF Mildenhall. The refueler and its crew are headed to the skies over Yugoslavia. Waiting for them, a group of NATO fighters and bombers. This Stratotanker is part of the lifeline of the NATO aerial fleet. The tankers support all of NATO forces flying missions over Serbia.
I think there's more intensity. People realize they got the game faces on. The whole Kosovo incident, serious matter. And we have a part to play in that, so people again put their game faces on and get ready for battle. 50 feet.
The first customers on this flight, F-117 stealth fighter bombers. Their last stop before making their bomb run.
Time check, time check.
The last thing the pilots need to worry about is running out of gas over enemy territory.
We know we're an integral part of the mission. Quite frankly, without the gas, the fighters don't have the legs, and the bombers and airlift don't have the legs to get to fly the distances.
A mission like this one usually keeps the crews in the air for about 8 hours before they rest. If the fighters and bombers are in the skies over Serbia the next night, tanker crews like this one will be there too. Senior Airman John Somhal, Air Force News, in the skies near Serbia.
Gasoline is not the only vital element in the operation. Up-to-date, accurate weather information is another, especially important in a part of the world where bad is about the nicest thing you can say about the weather. Weather information is the responsibility of a group of Air Force men and women whose workday consists of things like thermals and upper-level highs and fronts. Staff Sergeant Darren Wiley went to Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina, where the headquarters is located, to find out what the forecasters in the Balkans are up against.
In this area of the world, bad weather is the norm. The fog and rain can limit a pilot's visibility and bring flights to a screeching halt. The air campaign over Serbia, a significant percentage of the missions were affected. People like Senior Airman Jennifer Dorn, a weather observer who watched the skies over neighboring Bosnia for the past 3 months.
And there's such a fog banks coming in, rolling in day in, day out. It was nice to see the way the weather changed. It would have been really hard for forecasters.
And as hard as it may be for the forecasters, that information needs to be in easy-to-digest, simple terms for military planners.
Weather forecast impacts on operations, and we're going to portray that through color coding, through the green, the amber, and the red. This is a typical, but again, in the Balkans, the weather is pretty tricky sometimes. The areas of amber, more degraded conditions.
The A-10s provide close air support. That sort of professionals across the entire region.
Always easy.
Says he, speaking of retirement, man is stepping down after cockpit retires July 1st. Nominated